Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pennsylvania Patriot Radio. I apologize. We're having issues with an audio encoder on Todd's end, so we'll get to the show as soon as we can. But yesterday, our show is normal. It's supposed to be yesterday. I had some things come up, so I apologize. I didn't warn everyone what was going on. But what had happened was we had several people that had funerals and things like that, so we were unable to do the video. So it was supposed to start at noon today, but until we get these audio issues worked out, you're going to just have me. So thank you so much for tuning in. Todd's working on those audio issues, and he's far more advanced than me on that, so he'll get the encoder working on his end, and then we'll get started. But it should be a good show today. I think we're going to talk a lot about the developments that came out with the Russia hoax and things of that nature. So, yeah, it should be good. Let me take a brief break here, just to let you know we'll be on soon. And it looks like Todd's getting things worked out on his end. So let me go to this Zoom call and see if I can get it worked out. I'll stay live, but I'm going to switch screens on you here for a minute. So, so yeah, just bear with me for a second. Zoom. There we go. So, hey, let me check real quick. Todd, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I hope so, but we are live on my end. If you had anything that you wanted me to go off of being live for because you had some super secret dirt you wanted to talk about or something, just let me know. But I think everything looks good on my end that you should be able to see and hear me. So. But now everyone watching on our end gets to see kind of what goes on behind the scenes here, which is just us always struggling with technical issues. So we're getting it worked out, though. We're getting more advanced as time goes on. We're going to be getting, at least on my end, I'm going to be getting better equipment. I know Todd's got some irons in the fire of things that are going to be changing with our radio show and things like that. He's got a lot coming about kind of a whole television studio network that he'll be able to get going soon. So yeah, what's up, Paul, Patriot drummer? Thank you guys so much. Number one Patriot drummer, yeah. So I agree, audience. Trump 2020. We'll see. I think that Trump will legit win the election, but I wonder if it will be stolen from him. That's kind of my feelings on this situation. Also, if you're tuning in and you're not a regular listener of my show and you just watch the Pennsylvania Patriot Radio, our regular scheduled Saturday program should be continuing next week. So that's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays. There's Todd. Todd's on now. So, can you hear me, Todd?
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning. So we're live on my end, but there's only 6 people watching. I just told people we'd start at noon. I just wanted to let them know what was going on.
Yes, technology, we have a phrase on Pennsylvania Patriots Radio that the technology is wonderful when it decides it wants to work.
And that also goes for Carlos. The same phrase for him. Carlos is wonderful if he decides he wants to work. So I know he's running a little late here, so we'll wait for him to come on. Did you get it worked out in your end, Todd?
I did, and Carlos has just said he will be here roughly 12:10 p.m. So then we can go super live to everybody. Yeah. So it's kind of like when we do these this online room that we're in. Everybody's entered the waiting room, if you will. So part of the audience has entered the waiting room. So we'll have to see what's going on.
Hey, by the way, I don't know if it's anything you can talk about, but just before we get into the show, as far as like the television stuff that you had going on, is that progressing?
We have a meeting coming up this week, as a matter
of
fact, and hopefully I'll be able to report by the end of next week what next steps and what the next evolution looks like.
Awesome. That's great. Are you trying to get in? Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, I explained this last week and Todd was kind of picking on me. My office has become my baby's room, so I'm temporarily displaced, so I get to do my show next to a crib.
Well, what's going to be great is once the newborn bundle of joy arrives, I mean, you can begin the teaching, during every show, and okay, there's the bottle, and as Carlos or I are talking, you'll have to hide your video, hide your audio, and then there's the diaper change situation. It'll be great.
Yeah, fantastic. And then my child will grow up angry about Pennsylvania politics, as he should.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, we have so many segments that are brought to you by certain diaper companies.
Right,
you know what
right.
I mean? With certain topics that come up.
We need to find a non-woke diaper company that would be willing to sponsor us. It could be tough.
Or we could actually start our own, and I don't want to give away trade secrets, but it could be wokeless diapers.
It'd be a hit.
Sorry, that was.
Oh man. So Carlos should be here any second then. We assume he usually gets us started, so he'll have something worthwhile to say.
Yeah, as soon as he jumps into this waiting room, I'll go ahead and do what we normally do, and everything going, and let me just enable the share screen so he can share the tweets that he always brings to the table.
Yep. Oh, you sent something on Facebook.
And we certainly appreciate the audience kind of moving around with us a little bit.
Yeah, they're at least the ones that would. So, where do you broadcast this on your end? Oh, never mind. We can talk about it later. Carlos is here.
There he is.
We're half live, Carlos. So
yes,
half live.
Yeah, there's 8 people watching on my end, just so you know.
Okay.
So how about this, Carlos? How about a 10-second silent count, and I'll hit record, and we can begin our Sunday show.
Fabulous.
10-second silent count begins now.
Alrighty. Well, good morning, America. How are you? It is Sunday, September 27th, and this is Penn Patriots Radio's Pushback. I'm here today with my very good friends Todd Bartley here in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and the great Robert Knorr from Clarion County. And I had a different opening this morning in mind because and we're still going to do a very deep dive on Russiagate and Spygate on the second hour from 12 to 1, completely all Russiagate. But the appointment by the President of the United States of Amy Coney Barrett is an important development that we need to discuss because it does affect the election in November, and it affects us all as Americans going forward with respect to jurisprudence. Which the more I think about it, the more that we need better jurisprudence. So I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to talk about Biden. I'd like to talk about a little bit about Myrtle Beach, and I'm going to open up with Myrtle Beach and the issues that are happening locally here in Williamsport and in the state. And we'll open up with Todd in just a minute here. But I would like to also tell you that we're going to be talking about COVID and the effects that it's had. And part of my extended opening was the fact that we are now going to very, very soon start seeing the effects of this virus, and it's not obviously the scientific effects, but the economic effects of the neglect that was used by these people, these politicians, and not a lot of them, but enough that at least in Pennsylvania, it's going to be horrible. Everybody pays. There is no free lunch. These things were born. These ideas were born because they're real. They exist. They represent. They represent events and incidents in our lives, which is why they're so catchy now. No free lunch. So these are the type of slogans that kind of run our world sometimes without any deep literacy and understanding of what these things mean. Well, what do you mean by no free lunch? So with that idea in mind, and I'm not going to tell you what a free lunch is, you should actually kind of look it up yourself. Okay, that's part of our ideology of you standing on your own 2 feet and defending your ideas. I would like to start with the question of the day with Todd. 2 minutes on Black Lives Matter is more than just a catchy slogan, correct, Todd?
It's much, much more, Carlos, as we've chronicled on this show. And as you mentioned, go look it up. Go look up Black Lives Matter. It's a Marxist organization. The 3 leaders are devout Marxists. And for those that subscribe to the BLM movement beyond the headline, I mean, you need to be beyond the headline, right? We've talked about this. Everybody agrees that Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Everybody gets it. I don't think there's a reasonable person that would disagree with that premise. However, it does not then allow you to go burn down personal or government property just because you subscribe to a Marxist ideology that's been corrupted with a headline that should matter.
And a very catchy slogan. A very catchy slogan.
Yeah, no question. And then if you speak out, not necessarily in opposition, but that you want to have a deeper conversation about the slogan, you're shunned, you're called racist. It's just not right what's going on right now in our country in regard to this movement. Everybody agrees changes need to be made. Let's have the conversation. Let's start the dialogue. Let's go forward, make some positive changes. But you can't do that when you're getting Molotov cocktails and bricks and soup cans and everything else thrown at you and fire set. Think about it, right? Fire set.
Right. You hold deliveries even.
Yeah. I mean, it's so beyond the pale right now with what's going on with this movement and the justification because of the headline that those folks that subscribe to that movement and started that movement feel that they have.
Right. So, good morning, Rob.
Morning.
Do you think the Democrats have everything set up now? The infrastructure set up for them to steal the election?
Yes, absolutely. I think that. And if there's any doubt, look at the situation with Russia. They had an infrastructure set up in 2016. I mean, the irony of the news cycle this entire week was we had Democrats foaming at the mouth in the media because Trump wouldn't commit to a peaceful transference of power. But if you technically get into the question he was asked, he actually gave the only truthful answer, which is they specifically said, well, there are riots right now in Louisville. How can you assure a peaceful transition of power? Well, if Trump wins, how can he assure that the Biden voters don't riot? It's impossible. The Democrats have made it impossible that if they don't win, there will be more riots. But aside from that question, the irony of the question is that we're now seeing evidence that I'm sure we'll talk about today that came out that there never was a peaceful transfer of power from the Obama administration. They decided to spy on Trump and have investigations that have gone on and on that are still going on to this day. And so if they have that set up, there is no doubt in my mind that we could see the steps they're taking to steal this election. And without getting too technical, just know this. The same Democrats, the same people that they tell us we need to look for on guidance of COVID, the CDC, Dr. Fauci, and others, they have said that voting in person is perfectly safe. We see these same Democrats encouraging people going out to protest by the hundreds of thousands for Black Lives Matter. They've actually protested the post office master's home. They've protested Lindsey Graham's home. They've protested Mitch McConnell's home. So if you could go do all that stuff, and the doctors and the experts all tell you it's safe to vote in person, why are we changing the way we've done elections 2 months before an election? And the reason is because it's quite clear that they are trying to make this an election that needs to be litigated in courts. And if you could say one thing about the establishment Democratic Party, it's that they're the party of lawyers. They got more lawyers and more billionaires in their back. So it's no doubt to me, you're already starting to see little stories like here in Pennsylvania, the 9 ballots that were accidentally tossed out that all happened to be Trump supporters that were in the military. You're going to see stuff like this occur on a mass scale. And I think that the polls are dog whistling, or I'm sorry, gaslighting us to say, oh, of course Biden's 10 points ahead in Pennsylvania. That way, when they steal the election, they've already told us, it will look like Trump won on election night. But as these mail-in ballots come, then all of a sudden it'll be, well, Biden ended up pulling it out. That's what the polls said. The polls all said that that's what was going to happen. So, yeah, I think...
And that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
I asked you the question because they have the polling. You know, everybody got the memo on the polling from the DNC. They couldn't get to Fauci and the other people at the CDC to say the right thing that they wanted, but they have the polling. They've started to bleed the idea of mail-in ballot or mail-in voting. Okay, and in Pennsylvania, you don't even need a postmark. So how do you prove when it was sent? So, and the real reason why I asked you the question is because I believe that they asked the president that question so they could go back to the question when the election happened and there were questions of cheating, and they would say, see, the president said that he would accept the transfer of power, no matter what. And so they have all their bases covered. All they know how to do is cheat. All they've ever done is cheat. And my overall question to both of you is, how much cheating and lying and stealing does the Democratic establishment and the hardcore left, and now the progressives, have to do to make reasonable people see that this is what it is and vote in their own interests, not against them? Do you think? How many have to do that? How many vote? I mean, is it going to take? Well, let's start with an anchor. Do any of you think that Washington, Oregon, California, or New York are at play for the Republican Party in 2020?
I would say more so than in the past. I think they're in play, but
I'll buy that.
Yeah, you know, I don't know that. I'm not guaranteed. By no means am I saying, even cheating aside, that Trump or the Republicans would win those states. But I definitely think that you're starting to see movements in those places, and it's primarily because, I would say, of Black Lives Matter and of Antifa.
Would it be ironic if they cheat and win the election in Pennsylvania, and they cheat and win the election in Virginia, and what's the other major state that you think that they're probably cheating in?
Michigan.
Florida? Michigan?
Yeah.
That Trump loses those but wins New York and California. How ironic would that be?
It would be a miracle if he wins California. But yeah, that would definitely be ironic. I mean, and the thing is, like, you have to understand, I know Carlos, me and you, and well, certainly Todd as well. Like, we're all kind of sports nuts. It's like this. When you remember there was a story in the NBA years ago, Todd, you might remember this specifically, where it turned out there was a ref that was kind of paid off. It was in a playoff game. You remember this? Like, you don't need the ref. If the competition's going to be close enough between two professional sports teams, you don't need the ref to be super blatant. Like, everything's a foul. All you need to do is have some key calls that go the opposite way that could influence the game. Well, the same's true in these elections. No matter what you think of how horrible the Democratic Party is, there are millions of people that will vote for them. And no matter how bad you think the Republicans are, there are millions of people that will vote for them. So it's not like we're likely to see an election that's like one party wins 80%. It's more likely to be 55-45 or something along those lines. So the cheating that needs to take place isn't swinging 30% of the vote. It's swinging 4% of the vote. And that's certainly doable. And so the question is, will people realize it? And I don't know. And I will say this: if there are people on the left that are watching, it's like, oh, here we go, sour grapes from the right. I think that it's evident that the fact that the Democrats are completely overhauling 2 months before an election for no reason, when even the medical experts say it's unnecessary, completely overhauling how we do elections, it's clear that they want to create a lack of faith in our election system. And I'll say that in its own right
is to subvert the election.
That's right. That's devastating. It does not matter what the outcome of this election is. People won't believe the results. That's devastating.
Do you think that people see that?
Absolutely. And let's just take the Missouri County case.
And more importantly, do you think that Democrats that are fair-minded patriots see that? So do you think that there's going to be enough of them that either stay home or vote for Trump? And more importantly, the biggest block of all is the block that doesn't vote, right? The independents, along with the people who never vote. What do they do? I think that one of the things that a lot of people aren't talking about, that to my satisfaction, is that those are the people that are going to, this year, I believe, decide the election. The people who never vote and the people who are independents. What say you, Todd?
I think you're going to have voter turnout that will be the largest in U.S. history in this election. Mm-hmm. And I think the Luzerne County case is a snapshot of what we're about to see.
Could you give me any details? Have you seen any extracurricular details regarding those 9 votes in the last 3 days?
So here's what happened, and this just came out, that the 9 ballots that were found,
right,
7 of the 9 were cast for Trump.
Okay.
And then the other 2, I believe, were disqualified because the seals were broken or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where there was 1 seal on the inside, 1 seal on the outside. They were broken, so disqualified. So let's just do some math. If 7 out of 9 ballots, and I'm going to round it up, if 7 out of 10 military ballots went for Donald Trump, that is almost Mondale Reagan style numbers.
Correct.
Across the board.
Great point.
Let me say that again. 7 of the 9 ballots found in Luzerne County that had been discarded were votes for Donald Trump. If you round up and give Joe Biden 3 of the 10, if you will, you get 70%. That's 70-30. That is not a 10% national lead for former Vice President Joe Biden.
Right.
And I think you're going to see landslide style numbers with everything that's gone on, because I think the great majority of Americans, both sides of the aisle, are seeing this. Now, to your point about the election, this cuts both ways. This is what the left is not telling you about this cutting both ways. If you're going to delegitimize the election, plainly, if you're going to delegitimize it, what's to say if Joe Biden wins, it was legitimate?
Right.
You've delegitimized the outcome of the election. So what's to say if Joe Biden wins that election that he's not a legitimate president either?
It's what the Democrats are saying with nominating Barrett. You know, the process is bad, and Kavanaugh. The process is corrupt, so they don't really count.
Well, then let me ask you a question about Judge Barrett. I know we'll get into this here in just a second.
Yeah.
I want to posit this now at 12:30, and then we can use it in our last 90 minutes. But just an overarching thought, to go back to the first question you asked me about Black Lives Matter. Amy Coney Barrett adopted 2 children from Haiti. Okay? Their skin color is black. So obviously, to potential Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Black Lives Matter. She has 2 adopted children. Jen Lake, you're on line 2. We'll get back to you in a little while on the show.
Right.
Well, and the irony about that is, and this is where critical race theory that's being taught in academia, which Donald Trump is trying to get out of the federal government, where it leads in Black Lives Matter that has adopted that and embraced that ideology, there are blue checkmark Twitter people right now that have wrote for the 1619 Project that are saying it's a form of white colonialism that Coney Barrett, right, that she adopted black. So it's really racist that she chose to adopt black children from Haiti. Now, this does two things. One, it shows the disgusting nature of how far the Democrats are willing to go to attack children in an effort. I mean, let's be honest. We all know that they're going to vote no on her. Why not just say, we're going to vote no because of Roe v. Wade? Or we're going to vote no because we think that Trump's bad and this pick's bad. Right. Why do you have to bring her kids into it? It's disgusting.
Because they have nothing to offer.
Well, and the second...
Is the bottom of the barrel.
That's right. And the second part of this shows what the, quote, anti-racist movement's really about. It literally is about saying everything is racist. If you want to adopt, Todd...
To get power.
Right. And so, Todd, if you want to adopt and you're like, I don't care the skin color, and you happen to adopt a black child, well, that proves you're racist because you wanted to subjugate a black person. But if you adopt a white child, well, that proves you're racist because you were unwilling to adopt a black child.
There's no way you can win.
Right.
Todd.
Yes.
So,
yes, Carl.
Based on what Rob just said about the... What is it, the white or the American colonialism?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
white. It's white colonialism.
If it's white colonialism for Amy Coney Barrett, what is it for the Kaepernicks?
It's
it's the same exact thing, correct?
Literally
the same exact thing.
It's the same thing for Westford School District Board Member Jennifer Lake. Is it not?
So, all of them. Right? So, and listen, my problem with Jennifer Lake is not that she adopted a black child. And I'm not willing to go as far to say that she's a racist. Okay? I'm just saying that we're not racist as a district. And I am not going to have someone tutor me or lecture me just because you adopted a black child, okay? Especially, and I don't really do this well, which is why my wife defends me, especially being Latino. And I got to be honest with you, Todd, you've known me 5 years
at least.
And Rob, you've known me a year and a half.
About 2. Yeah.
This is the very first time I've ever said that, right?
Yep.
This is the very first time I've ever said that, where I used my race to exclude myself from the example, okay? Because I don't think that way. But because color doesn't help you think or not think, okay? So Kaepernick, on the other hand, has said some things that are completely and utterly racist. So why does the colonialism not apply to Kaepernick's family?
But they don't care about double standards. They're postmodernist Marxists that don't care about the truth, right? That's why.
I wanted to give the sports guy a sports thing.
Right. Let's take the example further, though.
But you're absolutely right. That's the answer, right?
Let's take the example further. If it's racist of you to adopt a black child because you're trying to subjugate them, let's say you're a white person who wants to marry a black person. Wouldn't that be subjugation and colonialism? And then all of a sudden you start to realize the ugly truth. The anti-racist movement is the racist movement. When your positions directly align with the KKK, go look at the Chad zone. Remember, black-only zones. Go to academia, black-only zones and white-only zones. We don't want white people adopting black children. We don't want white people interracially marrying with black people. This is just racism. That's all it is.
I don't want people going out to Halloween, and that is what I object to the most.
Right. Yeah, right.
I'm kidding, but I'm not. I'm very serious.
Well, it takes fun and comedy, and that's part of their agenda. That's part of this communist agenda.
To delete and absolutely destroy comedy and right. They're not the party of fun anymore, as Robert Knorr famously coined. I use that all the time, by the way, just so you know.
Go back to the Soviet.
Not the party of fun anymore.
What's your favorite comedy that came out of the Soviet Union? Right? Oh, wait, there are none. Right? Like, that's the truth of it.
Andropov.
No, there is one. There is one. Do you remember the two guys that called Adam Schiff and said they had the dirt on the president? Do you remember those guys?
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
It's great. But yeah, I mean, that's the truth of it. And I mean, and look at, and just, again, here's why this is important to bring up. Because one of the things that we that are conservatives have, by losing the culture war, we've also ceded the battleground on many things that we should have never done. For example, we've always, not everyone, and you all understand. When I talk about left and right or conservative or leftist, it's not everyone. I get that. But I'm just saying in general and the people that control the movement. Conservatives have spent time trying to win intellectual arguments, whereas the leftists tried to win emotional arguments. Right? And so that's what's uniquely appalling. They've claimed that, oh, we are the emotionally correct side. We're the morally correct side. Yet they're now advocating for segregation. Look at the other attacks we see on Amy Coney Barrett. One of the attacks I saw, again, from Blue Checkmark Journalist on Twitter was, well, how many kids does she have? 6, 7 kids?
7.
7 kids, right? Will it be possible for a woman with 7 kids that she's raising to be a Supreme Court justice? That seems like she'll be neglecting her duties as a woman. Oh, so now the left is the party of women should stay at home in the kitchen. Everything that they lectured you about and said that you were evil and sexist and racist, it's what they believe. That's what they honestly believe. They don't care. As soon as it helps them get power, they will make every disgusting attack that they falsely attributed that's in your heart. But they don't care. Like for this, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And Scalia had 9 children.
Right.
Didn't affect him none.
Well, they would never say that about a man, would they? They would never say that about a man, proving their sexism.
Right. And then on top of that, right? And maybe I'm wrong, but on top of that, she's Catholic, and how many people on the Supreme Court are Catholic? The majority of them, right? So everywhere they go, it is an area code that is false. It's a false area code. It's all lies. It's all double standards. Everything. They don't have an objective ideology, and this is the bottom of the barrel. When you just throw stuff up on the wall hoping it sticks, that's their platform. Is that not correct in Pennsylvania with the governor, Todd?
Well, I just wanted to give you one more about how critical this particular nomination is, because I believe Justice Thomas has also hinted that he is contemplating retirement over the next several years.
What he's doing is what Ginsburg should have done in the Obama years, right? They must be really upset with her that she died before this and didn't retire in the Obama administration.
Well, and the whole theory was she was going to be her replacement was going to be nominated and filled by the first female president in U.S. history, and we all know how that played itself out. But to go back to Justice Thomas,
yes.
If you think about this for a minute, you're potentially looking at half the Supreme Court justices going forward for the next 40 years nominated and Senate approved by Donald Trump if he wins the second term.
I wouldn't say 40, I would say 25. But that's still a big number.
2.5 generations, 3 generations.
Big number.
And
the real damage, guys, the real damage is not the Supreme Court justices. Because what the Democrats should fear is not that they're going to rule on outcomes like the Democrats do, is that they're going to rule and not accept cases and keep them in lower courts and send them and remand them back to the legislatures where they should be adjudicated. Okay, make the law. Don't use us as your stamp, rubber stamp. And that's the first point. Okay. The second point is, what about all the under judges? All
300
district judges. Listen, I would almost give you a Democratic SCOTUS, a Supreme Court justice. I'd put Merrick. I'd put him on the thing. There is no way. There is absolutely no way that there is anything more important than McConnell and Donald Trump did than to appoint over 3 100 district judges, and if he gets another term, it will change the face of America, because it will literally close the door on the Democrats. Because if these are all constitutional judges, which I'm hoping that they are, this is the equivalent, Robert, of the left owning all the institutions, but the institution that I think matters most are the courts and the judiciary. And say what you want, Donald Trump, he's done his damage. It's irreparable for the next 2.5 generations.
Well, I would say,
in my humble opinion.
Right. I would say the most important things Trump's done, in no particular order, would be what you're saying with the judges. I think that's right up there. I think that what we saw him do in the past couple weeks in attacking critical race theory is literally that important. Getting back in the culture and understand that academia is poison, that it's killing our country. It's driving our kids to hate this country and indoctrinating the future leaders to hate this country. So fighting back against that's important. And then the last thing that could be important is actually criminally charging the people engaged in a coup against him and showing the country how corrupt that these institutions were. But I will say, and I don't disagree with anything you said there, I will say, though, that the next step that I think Trump and the Republicans need to make, and hopefully this is a step that you out there listening to us, maybe this is a step you could take when you talk to your left-wing friends, is this. Why does the courts have so much power? What does Congress do? This is not what our founding fathers intended. The court has way too much power. Congress does nothing. We literally, and I talked to you about this the other night in the phone, Carlos, we could literally just take Congress and appoint 500 and something odd homeless people and give them the salary, and they would be more effective.
And the over-under of what would happen in the future is about the same,
right?
Correct?
At least then we'd be providing money to people that could use it. Like, what does Congress do? What do they do? Does anyone know?
They spend the money.
That's it.
They spend the money.
And even then, right? Like when we need money spent, like when, I don't know, all these state governors decided to lock down all these states and crush people economically. So when we need Congress to actually use the purse strings to actually get money into the hands of business owners and people struggling to pay their bills, they can't do it. They can't. They're just like, oh, we're deadlocked. Sorry, we can't do it. Right. It's up to Trump now. Trump has to use emergency spending. I mean, this is nonsense. And I mean this by both parties, though clearly I think the Democrats are far worse. But Todd and Carlos, we talk about this often. What if Republicans that we've elected in our state, a lot of the state level ones are okay, but at the national level, I'm not going to mention any names, but I know several national level Republicans. What have they been doing the past 6 months? Were they defending our constitutional rights and complaining about lockdowns? Were they publicly speaking saying, no, we're not a racist country? Did they do any of those things that were important? Or did they talk about whole milk and the necessity of it being in public schools? Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah. So you know what my feelings are.
That's a shot right there. But here's the question that I have for you. If no one is indicted, what how does any of this matter if no one is indicted?
Well, let me give you the perfect.
And in my mind, I struggle with this in my mind because I think a lot about it. I struggle with it. I think that the message that would be sent across the world would be loud and clear of America leading again if Strzok and McCabe and Page and Brennan and Clapper and Comey were indicted and prosecuted. But moreover, the real clarion trumpet would be to indict and arrest Hillary Clinton and President Obama, because there is no question, we're getting into it in the second hour, there's no question that they colluded to take down a president of the United States. There's no question. And there were so many things that came out this week, guys. Weren't we told that the son of a high-ranking sitting politician meeting with someone representing a foreign nation and getting $3.5 million from Russians, which influenced U.S. policy, was a conflict of interest, treason even, and disqualified the father to be president?
Yeah, we've worked.
I wonder if the mayor of Moscow's wife had given Trump Jr. $3.5 million if it would have made the papers. So if none of that matters and no one is indicted out of that, what value does American jurisprudence have? If you believe in rule number 6 of the rules of power, that would be rule number 6. What is unseen counts for nothing.
Look, I could make this very simple, and then we'll leave Todd respond, but just a quick answer is this. We'll get into the specific details. Let's just ask this. In 2008, we had a financial crisis where basically the entire country, even regular Joe Schmo workers, know now what happened. That there were corrupt people in financial institutions that were giving mortgages they knew would never be paid back and then packaging those mortgages as if they were AAA rated, and that ended up causing the average American worker that had 401ks tied up in this to lose huge amounts of money. Devastated our economy. Everybody knows the story. Anybody get arrested? Right. Anyone?
But I have a caveat to that. It was a Obama administration that ruled for 8 years in the time that there should have been arrests. It happened at the very end of 43's, in the fall of 2008 when the market crashed. But it was up to Obama to investigate and to indict.
Right, but
they didn't because they are in bed with Wall Street.
Right. But the point I'm making is this. I'm not even trying to
One of the reasons why people are making money hand over fist in Wall Street right now, in spite of the pandemic, is because the left controls Wall Street. Does that now make better sense to you?
Right, and I'm not trying to...
Not you personally, but in general.
Right, and I agree with all that, but I'm not trying to even use this example to cast blame. I'm just saying, whoever you think was at fault, just know this. We all know there was corruption. No one got punished. Now, did anything change?
Right.
We know. And this is the argument that infuriates me. That's like, you hear conservatives saying, well, even if no one gets charged in this coup attempt against Trump, now we all know. And so,
who cares?
We know, and now the FBI knows. Oh, right. We can engage in a coup against the president and there will be no consequences. Just like the bankers know, hey, we can defraud the American people out of billions of dollars and nothing will happen to us. And so that's why it's so important. But I know Todd wanted to say something, so.
Well, let me lead into Todd. Todd, you have kids. What happens when there are no consequences to wayward behavior, let's just say?
They don't get to drive the car. They don't get to go to friends' houses. Certain things are taken away. It is what it is.
There are consequences, correct?
No question. Yeah.
And so if we're going to be the greatest country on earth, we lead by being able to show examples to the rest of the world that consequences are important and necessary. And I think that Robert's third point of what he believes Trump has done needs to be underscored severely with consequences and indictments. I mean,
okay,
I need you to understand that, and we're going to talk about it in a couple of minutes. If it wasn't for the judge in Flynn's case holding this up for as long as he did, we might have never found out about the $3.5 million and all these other things that are now coming out. That's the problem.
Would you call that an unintended consequence?
I certainly would. That was driven forth by unforced errors, which is one of my favorite things in terms of, strategizing against an opponent. is they're going to make way more mistakes than you can ever plan for. But what does it say about our country if we continue to allow no consequences for criminal behavior? What's the difference between us and Venezuela?
Let me give you a line that someone shared with me this week that has resonated with me. I may put it in a frame on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It was, Todd, we can't stop them from lying. It just resonated with me to my core, because we're being lied to on a consistent basis by the national media, by the folks running this sham against the seated president. Now, you had brought up indictments. Here's the timing. It's going to take a Trump second term to get Durham to indict who you mentioned, a former Secretary of State, a former presidential candidate, and potentially a former president.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a second term, because if that happens between now and or election day, it's going to be perceived by the electorate that the president interfered and tried to take out a political opponent, and it's going to look really, really bad. He needs to use the Governor Wolf strategy. The most powerful governor in the history of Pennsylvania is a lame duck governor. What are you going to do? Impeach him, remove him, vote him out? You can't. He's not running again. So he can do whatever the hell he wants to do, and nobody's going to stop him.
But the problem is he has to win, right? And that's his fault in this sense, that he appointed people like Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr that took their time. I was doing videos 9-10 months ago where if you give me 10 minutes, I could show you how Comey, Brennan, Clapper, McCabe, Weissman all lied to Congress. Now, this is the same crime that they charged, lying to investigators, the same crime they charged George Papadopoulos with, the same crime they charged Roger Stone with. So we even had the IG recommend a criminal indictment against James Comey for leaking classified information to the press. Yet Barr declined to do that. Now the excuse we're given is, oh, well, we can't do anything now. We have to wait until after the election. Now, simultaneously, what we opened with, the question Carlos opened with me is, are the Democrats going to steal the election? Well, now they have even more of an incentive to steal the election, because they want to end these prosecutions. And remember, the same Democrats that screamed at you until they were blue in the face, Donald Trump obstructed justice. He obstructed justice. Well, what did he do? Didn't Mueller admitted he was able to do everything he wanted? So did Comey. Where was the obstruction here? Well, he had mean tweets. He had mean tweets about Mueller. He contemplated getting rid of Mueller. And that, just the contemplation, was considered obstruction by all the Democrats. Day one of a Harris-Biden administration, or Harris, whoever they decide to replace the shell of Joe Biden with, day one of that administration, they're going to be like, oh, Bill Barr and Durham were political, we're getting rid of that investigation. And that won't be deemed. All the know-it-alls that told you, all of your friends on the left that told you Trump mean tweeting about Mueller, but allowing Mueller to continue was obstruction of justice, will applaud and say, yes, it's right to wrap up that Durham Barr probe. We need to wrap it up. So, yeah, I guess at this point, we just hope that Trump can beat out the theft of the election that the Democrats are going to try. And then maybe 4 years from now, we can finally see someone engaged in a coup be brought to justice. In the meantime, the coup continues. There'll be another impeachment of Trump. There'll be more leaks from the State Department and the FBI, and more. We saw that the State Department, for example, in the Ukraine branch under Obama, or even under Trump, that with Yovanovitch and all of them, they were spying on U.S. journalists, monitoring their social media accounts and things like that. This stuff will continue unabated until people go to jail, and not for white-collar prison for 6 months. You tried to overthrow a sitting president. That's sedition or treason, the penalty for which should be the maximum offered, whether it be the death sentence, life in prison, 30 years in prison, something like that. Until we start to see those results, this country will not be in the hands of the voters. It will be in the hands of the corrupt deep state.
Gentlemen, the president last night at the Harrisburg airport at his rally, in the rain, by the way, said about the election that he plans to be in court over the next 2 years to certify the election.
Yep.
He said 2 years. Well, the new president, whoever it is, gets inaugurated in January of 21. Right?
Yep.
Are we really going to end up at the Supreme Court to decide an election in 2020 in this country? I thought we were the model of the world for democracy. We show other countries how to do elections. Oh, that's right. We also show other countries how to destabilize governments by upending elections. Are we really using that playbook on ourselves?
Yes, they are.
It's a color
Let's
revolution.
move on.
That's
Let's
what it
move
is.
on. Let's move on real quick to cover your quick thoughts. Let's just do this fast so we can get to the Russiagate. Todd, give me an update on Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach is still there. The waves still keep crashing onto the beach and onto the sand.
Mm-hmm.
They keep adding hotels and condos and like, oh, you mean on the story?
Mm-hmm.
So without giving away too much, there are things at play that have a deadline of later this week. Okay. And I'm very comfortable in my own shoes, very comfortable in my own skin. I've been positing this question for 2 years. If nothing happened in Myrtle Beach, why can't the coaching staff? Why can't the administration? Why can't anybody connect to that trip? Tell us what happened.
Right.
And there's a key piece of evidence in this case that I've been fighting for 2 years. And it's Brandon Pardo's phone. That is a school-paid-for, school-issued cell phone.
Why is that so critical?
He was on the trip. His son was on the trip. His nephew was in the room during the attack on John Doe 1. There is no question that has been verified, confirmed by everybody involved.
Can you tell the audience what Brandon Pardo's position is? What his job title is?
Brandon Pardo is the head principal at Williamsport Area High School. He has come up through the ranks as a principal and administrator over the years in the Williamsport Area School District. My sources have told me that he's done everything in his power to position himself to be a superintendent in that school district or another school district some way, somehow. And this case and his neck-deep involvement in it have kept him from becoming a super or going to the college level, because my understanding is he had a college offer pulled.
And
because of this case.
And real quick, just for if you're new to this, the case in a 30-second snippet is this. Williamsport Area School District, known for baseball, Williamsport, the home of Little League, their high school team goes to Myrtle Beach annually for a tournament. 2 kids were sexually assaulted, allegedly, and there was video taken of it by other members of the team. And basically, everyone, the coaches, all the people that were there tried to bury this story. Todd's been the only journalist in the area that was really on this from the get-go, and for years he's been trying to get to the bottom of this. We're finally starting to see like the state district attorney investigate this, and as a result, most likely of that, Todd himself not only has received threats but had his vehicle firebombed last month. So just real quick, just an update on that.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, have you received any threats since then, or have you received any? Is there any leads onto who possibly made that attack on you?
Yes, on both.
Yeah, and I know it's tough to talk about.
Legal parlance, asked and answered.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, you can keep going. I just know some people were asking what the case was about.
Yeah. So Brandon Pardo's phone is the single biggest piece, in my humble opinion, in this case. And for 2 years, the Williamsport Area School District has gone to the theory of, we're going to throw every excuse at the wall to see which one sticks. Well, right. I think the excuses have now run out.
And it's critical to get his phone, because getting his phone and looking at the texts and the calls will likely, given the evidence that you have uncovered, will likely prove that Pardo knew of the attacks in Myrtle Beach. And if that's true, that means that A, he violated the mandatory reporter law. B, he didn't call the police. C, he left the jurisdiction. D, that required him talking about it with other people, which is a conspiracy rap. And E, there is another charge that we are not in the position to be able to talk about right now because we don't want to unmask the victims. But there is another charge that's coming when that does happen, whether it's done by the Attorney General's office or by the law firm that the victim hired. That being said, that's why that phone is so important, because it'll prove or disprove that he knew about it, and moreover, it will end the case definitively with respect to, did it really happen? Now, of course, what people don't understand is that there's video of it, and the AG has the video. Okay, so the other aspect of this case is that there's 2.5. It's going on 2.5 years now that this happened, and if it wasn't for Todd Bartley sticking to the story, we would have never gotten here. We would have never gotten to this point and investigating and uncovering this heinous crime.
Let me real quick before we transition off Pardo. I don't know how you pronounce his name.
Pardo, yep.
Did you not report that it's quite possible that Pardo actually misled investigators in Myrtle Beach about whether he was aware of this case?
There is a recorded phone call between the principal, Pardo, and multiple detectives in Myrtle Beach. Okay?
Recorded by Myrtle Beach Police.
It was their belief, because they talked about it on the phone with the principal, that they felt they were being misled.
And let me just, if you're listening and this sounds...
3 times in a 6-minute phone call.
Right. So if you're listening and this sounds confusing, listen to what we're suggesting. 2 students were sexually assaulted by other people who filmed it and then shared that video and all chuckled about that sexual assault. The principal was on the trip. The principal claims to have not had knowledge of that, even though there's been Todd's done reporting that basically everyone connected had knowledge of this, and it is beyond belief that this knowledge got throughout the entire school district, but somehow the principal there didn't know. The principal neglected to report even the allegation of such, which he's required to do so. He neglected to report that. And then, when he was actually contacted by detectives looking into the case from Myrtle Beach, he basically played dumb and was like, oh, I don't really know much about it. So if this phone is found to show that Pardo was talking to people with knowledge or had text messages discussing this case at the time when he was telling police officers and reporters, oh, I have no knowledge of this, that will show that he lied to cover up allegations of a sexual assault on children. About the most heinous crime that you could think of.
Right. Not to mention that they went to Myrtle Beach with 40 players, no chaperones, no room
other than
list,
the coaching staff.
No, but no room list, no chaperones, and more importantly, if you don't have a room list, how do you do night checks?
So to put a bow on the question you asked me, there's some homework that's due, not by me. I already turned my homework in weeks ago. But it's pretty obvious that the former head baseball coach Ryan Miller is coordinating his responses along with the district.
Right.
And that's been proven in the right to know denials and answers, because his civil attorney, sent notice to the district that said, well, you can't have his phone because he's a former employee. And you're not coordinating your responses? Okay.
So the lesson here is, folks, kids, for all the cool kids out there, remember, when you want to sue someone civilly, the thing that you need to consider very seriously is the fact that there's something called discovery that the person that you're suing can ask for. And that can get very prickly, especially if you have a record, if you're not zipped up, and if you're not innocent. let that be a lesson to you, because the noose in these type of situations comes fast and hard. Consequences. And those consequences are coming to the people that refused open inquiry and stalled open inquiry and deliberately tried to block Todd Bartley's investigation.
And let's not forget...
And right to know requests. You know, the spirit of right to know, transparency. The district, the Williamsport Area School District, not only has their own solicitor, but last month they hired an extracurricular helper in yet another solicitor and law firm that specializes in educational law to help them manage Todd's right to know requests.
And let's not forget, real quick.
It takes a lot of people to be transparent. Right, Rob?
Right, and let's not forget, real quick, as they were doing this, people in positions of power at that school have been out there virtue signaling about, how moral they are, and Black Lives Matter, and the district is systemically racist, this is why this story should be important to each and every one of you, because this is a microcosm of the people that are in positions of power that are the most heinous will use these virtue signaling cheap words. Oh yes, this country or this district is systemically racist. Yes, yes. And then oftentimes you find out the things they're alleging in the abstract about your state or your school district or your country are things that they're actually culpable of in their personal lives. So the same people that...
And exactly right. Better said than I said.
So,
yes.
Like, when they talk about, there are victims in this country, whether it be based on race or sex or things like that, we can all agree that sexual assault victims, particularly underage sexual assault victims, are some of the least privileged, disenfranchised people in the history of the world. So if you're going to lecture us, why aren't you doing your job as someone who's tasked with making sure, first and foremost, these kids are safe under you? Why aren't you doing your job to make sure that they receive justice or they're protected? Instead, you'll go out and try to get state or national headlines by virtue signaling about, there's systemic racism here and Black Lives Matter and blah, blah, blah. It's disgusting.
Quickly on the governor and COVID in Pennsylvania, Todd. Is it odd that there's never any mention of hospitalizations and our numbers?
Yeah, remember early on, we were getting a daily update on there are X number of Pennsylvanians in the hospital and X number of ICU beds and capacity. That's been gone for a while now, guys. Why? Because the hospitals aren't swamped.
Right. So how many people have been hospitalized in the state of Pennsylvania in the last 7 months? Do we know?
So last update I had last week, and I asked the governor this, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday, it was currently 400 hospitalizations across the state with COVID-19.
How many in the country, do you think?
Let's see, if it's 50 states, 20,000 roughly.
Okay.
Just extrapolating out 400 times 50 states.
Did you know, because, I'm a fun facts guy. Did you know that in the winter of 2017, 2018, you're going to love this, Rob. Okay. The CDC estimated that there were 800,000 hospitalizations for the flu.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, the numbers don't lie. This is a disease that if you're over the age of 75 and you have comorbidities is very, very serious. And as such, the predictions that I made in March, that I have the videos to back up, including in conversations with you, Todd, and with you, Carlos, I suggested that what we should do is protect the most vulnerable population, which would be the elderly, possibly newborns, and allow everyone else to continue to go to work so that we could have an economy that was roaring to be able to provide the best possible services for those most vulnerable people. Instead, what our governor did was locked down the healthy population, that the numbers are quite clear that this disease, you have a 997 survivability rate if you're under the age of 65. Right. He locked those people down and intentionally sent COVID patients into nursing homes. thereby causing thousands of deaths. Go ahead.
But aside from the science, okay, aside from the science, we're not disputing. None of us are disputing that the science is right, that COVID is deadly. We needed to shut down. We needed to shut down the economy. Well, why didn't we do that in 2017, 2018?
Right.
And the answer is, of course, it's a presidential year, and they thought it was a fantastic excuse to shut down the country to help their cause defeat the president of the United States. Everything is considered through that lens. Is that not correct, Todd?
Yes, Carlos, and it's the old adage, and it got turned on its head. It's the economy, stupid, right? If the economy's good, you feel better than you were 4 years ago, you're going to keep the incumbent in the White House. If you feel like it's upside down, you're going to kick him out because the economy's stupid. Well, if everything was going great, the only way to flip the election, potentially, was to turn the economy upside down. What'd they do?
So we've lost 200,000.
The economy upside down.
And I have a question for Todd, just real quick, when it comes to media situations, in particular social media. So I had a live stream taken off YouTube while I was going live for talking about COVID. There are many questions people have about the natures of vaccines and things like that will be put out there and whether or not they'll take them. And that could get you kicked off social media for saying those sorts of things. The governor of New York, who was touted by Dr. Fauci, the lead expert to fight COVID, as the example we should all look at, came out this week and said he does not trust the FDA and Trump if they issue a vaccine. From a media standpoint, how can you take these double standards that we could have a governor tell the entire country, I wouldn't trust the vaccine, but if us three say, well, wait a minute, we have questions about masks or something like that, we're deemed a threat to society and must be silenced.
Right.
So I have some breaking news for the tech giants in 2021. If there indeed is a second Trump presidency, second term, and some things go in congressional and Senate races, all of the antitrust protections that the tech giants and social media giants have enjoyed since their inception, they're about to be pulled. Because they're no longer social media aggregators and you can post whatever you want. They are now making editorial decisions on content. And that is the single biggest plank in the structure to waive those protections. Because you're no longer just a social media aggregator of pictures and posts and everything else. You're now determining content.
Right. So to the people who are listening, I want to make sure that we help you stand on your own 2 feet by telling you that you can't find on the dashboard, on the COVID-19 dashboard, how many hospitalizations there have been across the country easily, but there were over 800,000 of them in the flu season of 2017, 2018. And we've had 200,000 people died since March in this country of COVID, but 400,000 died of abortion. So I love numbers. Let's do numbers all day.
Carlos, here's how disingenuous it is coming out of the governor's mouth. He was asked earlier this week at Pima headquarters about expanding the seating at high school events. Mm-hmm. School districts already have that. They can play sports. They can do what they want to do. And then he gives the caveat, but they don't have the unilateral authority to take out that virus. But he does? By keeping bars and restaurants at 50% capacity, by keeping an outdoor limit of 250, by keeping an indoor limit of 25? When did he become the czar of the coronavirus? When other states are completely open and not having outbreaks.
Right. So he took a victory lap this week. Tell us about that real quick, and then we can move on.
So you talked about my media brother and sisters and stuff, and this has been an amazing learning experience for me, okay? Been on a big stage, covered 2 Major League Baseball World Series early in my career. So I've seen, national media, regional media, I get it. What took me aback, and please don't misunderstand, I'm not banging on my media brothers and sisters. It was a learning process for me. When the governor said, I believe it was Thursday, Carlos, about 2787 being voted down, and that we needed to really, as a state, go back and do this thing for the election and go back and look at these other items that I have on my agenda. And that's really what the PA House and PA Senate really need to be focused on. And we're having this conversation amongst a couple of media members after the press conference, and they were like, well, I really don't have a story other than the fact that they're not getting along, and they haven't been getting along for quite some time. And I said, well, just my 2 cents of it, this has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with, he just took a victory lap for flipping 24 votes from his party from 2 weeks ago to yesterday.
24 Democrats voted for this bill, and he flipped them on the veto.
And my humble opinion is, he threatened them, and he said, listen, I'm the titular head of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania. You're either with me or you're against me, and you're voting against me at your own peril and your district's peril. And you don't think they flipped their vote?
But wait a minute, Todd. What would any of these threats have teeth? I mean, it's not like Governor Wolf would go so far as to threaten to remove CARES Act funding and things like that from certain districts that didn't support him, right? Or wait, has that happened?
Yeah, call Representative Diamond. He knows firsthand in his district. So again, for me, and then everybody's like, oh man, that really did happen. And so it was very humbling for me to then watch the reports from my friends in the media and how they were framed after that conversation when they played them on the 6, 10, and 11 o'clock news that night in different parts of the state. It's just little old me doing Pennsylvania Patriots radio on a Saturday and a Sunday with Carlos and Rob. Because in the arena of ideas, in this, we all share in it. But then to have those ideas carried forward by other media members going, yeah, that's a hell of a point he just made. When in fact, that's what it was. It was a victory lap. Mm. And then I asked, okay, so here, you're going to get into this later. Just let me finish my point. I asked the governor, first question of the day, about the budget deficits that are projected this year, next year, and beyond because of this pandemic, from a state revenue, state tax standpoint, and what the plan is going forward to offset those losses or shortfalls. His short answer was, the federal government needs to step in. They need another round of CARES Act funding. I'm sorry, it's not coming. So Pennsylvania better prepare itself for a financial reckoning as a state.
So, any comments on the governor and COVID real quick from you, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say real quick, I think that, understand this about Todd. I think Todd has been basically the best reporter in the country talking to an executive, at this point, a state executive, Governor Wolf, on asking tough questions about COVID and the response to it. But understand this about Todd, and I think the same could be said of Carlos and certainly of myself. We didn't wish failure from Tom Wolf. We didn't. In fact, I've gone so far to say, and I think I could speak for you two as well, this was a difficult situation, and there were no clear-cut answers of this is exactly what is the right way to go. I think my prediction ended up being as closest to the truth as almost anyone I've seen. But I would have understood if Tom Wolf would have made decisions that ended up being incorrect, but he was transparent and honest about those decisions. What the real story is that infuriates me is the fact that this is being used as a political game. So while Tom Wolf's policy, so just give you the clearest cut example, though there are literally dozens of situations like this we could talk about. Tom Wolf was calling you a coward if you were an average person in Pennsylvania who lost your job and wanted to go back to work. He said you were a coward, and that if your politicians at the county level actually decided to revoke the recommendations from Tom Wolf, he would consider removing funding and business licensing from you and your county. At the same time, Tom Wolf violated his own orders and marched with people in Black Lives Matter. And, you know, for example, he put people in nursing homes that had COVID, which resulted in thousands of deaths, while his health secretary was removing her mother from a nursing home. And then they pointed to those deaths and said, this justifies us locking you down and the government having all of these restrictions on you. He has flip-flopped dozens of times on, should we have a holistic approach to the state or should we go county by county? He wasn't able to answer the simplest questions Todd asked him, such as, well, wait a minute, what are the metrics we're using to determine when a county could go from code yellow to code green or from code red to code yellow? They had no answer to those things. And so that's what's frustrating. We're not here playing Monday morning quarterback and saying, oh, well, if what Wolf did was wrong and that proves that he's a horrible, immoral person. What we're saying is, yes, these were difficult situations, but it is clear that our governor has acted as a dictator, has not been transparent, and has used this to achieve political power. And that's resulted in incredible physical harm to the people of Pennsylvania, health-wise, economically, and it's literally caused untold amounts of deaths as they place COVID patients in with the most vulnerable population.
And if you look at this tweet that I just posted, can you see it?
Yeah.
I paused it. You see the circles on the ground there?
Yep.
Okay. They're 6 feet apart. There's a church in Ohio that held services outside and designated places for people to stand so they could worship. And the police came and they arrested the pastor anyway. I want to let that sink in. Look at the tweet. For those of you that are on the radio or are listening to us, you can't see it, but it is a video, I believe in Ohio, right, Todd?
Iowa.
Where there was a church service outside where they had designated spots in the parking lot for people to stand and social distance. And the police came and they arrested the pastor anyway.
They tased a mom at a high school football game watching her kids, tased and arrested her for not having a mask on. If you go to...
and there was nobody around her at all.
Right, and keep in mind, this is the entire Western world, right? Even though Australia is not in the West, we consider it kind of the tradition of the Western world. Australia, the draconian measures that are occurring there of mass arrests for people not wearing masks is incredible. In the UK, for example, just last night in Telford, they went in and were arresting all sorts of speakers. In Germany, they arrested a speaker yesterday. People that are criticizing the lockdowns, they'll arrest them. But if you want to riot and burn down the city in the name of Black Lives Matter, no arrest. The cops stand back. In every one of these instances. This is 1984. This is what George Orwell told us. War is peace. The truth is a lie. The criminals are now the just, and the just are now the criminals. If you want to peacefully exercise your right to protest, you'll be arrested. If you want to loot stores, I mean, for goodness sakes, we just have an example of Louisville, of a gentleman who shot at police, shot 2 police officers, and they're taking attempted murder off the table for him. We had an incident where someone threw a Molotov cocktail at police, and they're just considering it reckless endangerment. They'll get a slap on the wrist. I said this about the coup earlier today, Todd, and I'll leave you respond to this. If only James Comey would go sing a hymn in public, finally we could arrest him. Because it seems we can't do so when he's engaged in a coup.
Speaking of Louisville, this is the scene minutes after the Attorney General announced that there would be no charges against the cop, no murder charges against the cops that shot Breonna Taylor.
And for those that can't see it, it's a U-Haul.
This organization and the driver works for an organization that is funded by George Soros.
Right, and for those that can't see, it's a U-Haul showing up with signs, defensive equipment, and weapons immediately
Shields,
to Louisville.
right.
Shields, things of that nature. So this proves that this was organized. This wasn't an organic, hey, a bunch of people are outraged about this court decision. This was pre-planned, that they were ready to riot, and that there are organizations that are funding this.
Right, so look at right there. See right here? For the people who can see, she's dropping bags of what can only be described later in other reports after there were some arrests made of fireworks and missiles and and all kinds of projectiles and flame, all kinds of things that create havoc in a riot. You can see them dropping it, and you see that there's 5 or 6 bags. So
how did those folks know where that truck was going to be and what was in it?
Right. Well, they know. There's communications. There's obviously radio communications. See, she's just putting down the...
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and for those who can't see it, yeah, they're clearly dropping off weapons, and we know this. There was an email released from the Department of Homeland Security that showed that they are aware that, for example, in places like Portland, that Black Lives Matter and Antifa, despite the fact that publicly Chris Frey is telling us, oh, it's not an organization. Privately in their emails, they're saying there's clear evidence that there is funding going on, that these are organized groups, that they're engaged in tactics that required training. They use what's called Black Bloc, where you can go to their website, for example, Portland Antifa, it's called Rose City Antifa. They give you instructions on how to make Molotov cocktails, spike strips, clubs, things like that, how to bring them, how you could be one of like 10 different roles. Like some of the roles are people that hold umbrellas so that they can shield you from the cameras, so that they won't be able to, people that do crowd control, people that just seemingly peacefully interfere with the police so that the violent agitators are able to commit these crimes and there's interference ran, and so then you could be a potential victim if the police accidentally harm you as they're trying to get to the violent agitators you're protecting. This is occurring country over. There is no doubt that it's organized. We know this.
So let's get to the fun part. A deep dive on Crossfire Hurricane and Razor and General Flynn.
Okay.
This is one of 2 articles by the Federalist that broke the story on FBI texts detailing the internal furor over handling the Crossfire investigation. And of course, the other one was and I can only put one up at a time, but let's start with Razor, which is the investigation of General Flynn. Can you walk us through a timeline and a short cliff notes of events based on the timeline that you reveal, Robert, about why it's important to understand what the Obama's administration did in the last 6 months of 2016, culminating in the January 5th meeting regarding General Flynn?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have messages that were released from people in Obama's team and his close advisors that showed that they signaled Flynn out. So let me start with this to not make it overcomplicated. Understand, as someone who is an outsider to politics, and particularly someone who, as Chuck Schumer admitted to us all, seemed to be adversarial to the intelligence community, it was very difficult for Trump to find people with foreign intelligence chops and with national security chops that were going to be part of his team, because they're all involved in this corruption in both parties. So it was tough to find them that would want to sign on with someone like Trump that was potentially against the foreign policy agendas of Barack Obama. And so
an outsider.
Right.
An outsider.
That's exactly right. So Obama's team correctly showed that the biggest ally that Trump would have, as far as someone that not only would have Trump's back, but actually had the wherewithal, the knowledge, the experience to know exactly all of the terrible things that Obama and his administration had done, was General Flynn. And so they targeted General Flynn for potential crimes. We now know that there was a meeting in January 5th, thanks to Susan Rice, who is the primary advisor to Barack Obama. We'd received this email a long time ago, but it was redacted.
Long time ago.
And Susan Rice weirdly sent this email to herself saying, hey, everything we did was by the book. Now, why would you, in the context of your job, ever send an email to yourself that's like, I just want to let myself know that I'm not breaking any laws? It seemed incredibly strange. So this week we've actually received...
What do you think it meant?
Well, it was them laying the groundwork that if someone saw this, they would give plausible deniability that, oh, we didn't know we were breaking the law. We set out to do everything by the book. See my email? It proves. Even at the time, we set to do everything by the book. It would be as if, bank robbers sending each other emails the day they rob the bank. Hey, we're all going fishing today and not robbing a bank. Whatever we do today, we're not going to rob a bank. And then pointing back to that email and saying, well, we couldn't have robbed the bank. Here's our email saying we didn't rob the bank. So now we know from that email the full context of it, that it was Barack Obama himself directly in a January 5th Oval Office meeting that included Joe Biden, that included Susan Rice, that included James Comey. It was Obama directly that asked Comey about whether or not Flynn had inappropriate contacts with Russia and whether it was safe for Obama to give the accurate foreign policy picture to the incoming Trump administration, or were they doing something illegal? Comey takes up that mantle and starts and goes with the investigation. We know from the article you just put up of the Federalist that months before that, the FBI was directed by higher-ups that we found out thanks to another article that was released from a interview with a high FBI agent named Barnett. We now know that what was going on was that the FBI decided that they were going to look into Flynn, the incoming national security advisor, for allegedly inappropriately talking to Russians. Barnett, who was the FBI agent that we've seen this information disclosed this week, thought that this was incredibly shady, that there was no there. He cited, we have text from other FBI agents saying that they thought that this was being ran by people who, quote, wanted Hillary Clinton to win. We have Barnett saying that there was never any evidence, it was just that they were trying to stall and buy time. Trump famously tweeted out, once he was put into office, that perhaps the reason that the FBI was failing to have a meeting with him about Russian interference was that they were trying to, quote, build a case. In other words, they were trying to dig up dirt on Trump. We now have text messages that were released from FBI agents saying, yes, Trump was right. That's exactly what the FBI was doing, trying to get dirt on Trump. All of this and all of these text messages, the picture that it's painting is admissions from FBI agents at the time admitting there was never a case against General Flynn, that it was all political and it was designed to take down Donald Trump. So much so that their text messages admit that they purchased liability insurance because they feared that the incoming attorney general that Trump appointed would no doubt appoint an inspector general to look at them. So why would they need liability insurance? They knew what they were doing was wrong. This is all admitted in text messages that we could see today. So we know that Obama...
And this is the story that broke this week.
That's right. So we know that Obama was directly the person that was suggesting targeting Flynn. We know that FBI agents themselves, including one named Barnett, we know that they thought there was no case against Flynn. We know that they took out liability insurance because they thought that it was so shady what they were doing. We know that they said that the FBI agent said that this was being done from above, from the higher-ups, that wanted Hillary Clinton to win. We know that these text messages said that they thought the criminal leaks about Flynn's phone call came directly from the White House staff. So those are things that we all found out this week. This is incredibly damning. It is the admission that this was a coup against Donald Trump. Now, understand this. We also know from Barnett, who was the FBI agent in his interview, we know that the case against Flynn had actually closed in November. And that he thought that was a good thing because there was nothing there.
And that was Strzok, right? That was Strzok that closed the case.
So Strzok closed the case. And they thought that would be the end-all be-all of it. But then, after the January 5th meeting, where Barack Obama specifically mentioned Flynn, all of a sudden, they decided to reopen the case. Now, we've known for over a year now that the FBI agents did not think Flynn committed a crime. That he did not lie to the FBI. And yet, Mueller still elected to go ahead and press those charges. Not only that, we now have admissions from these FBI agents that the original crime that Flynn was accused of somehow doing something illegal and talking with his counterpart in Russia, was the FBI thought it was completely bogus. All of the agents did. So we know...
One note, Robert. You brought up Mueller.
Yeah.
Now, can you just give me 10 seconds on what the context of having the Mueller investigation team be over 40 people large, right? There's over 40 people on that investigative team, and every single one of those people were handpicked and were supporters of Hillary Clinton.
Right, including some of them that had actually worked for the Clinton Foundation as defense lawyers. including Weissman, who was the second in command. Well, real quick, Weissman, that was the second in command, he actually attended Hillary Clinton's, what they thought would be celebration election night, which ended up being devastated for them.
In the Javits Center.
Right, and keep in mind this, real quick, about Weissman. Weissman is now on a media tour. You remember when we were told Mueller was the end-all, be-all? Oh, Mueller's, he's unimpeachable. He's a very intelligent man. He's by the book. It's Mueller time.
The greatest sauce ever.
That's right. Remember, it's Mueller time. All of your Democrat friends told you, oh my God, Mueller's going to bring the hammer. Wait and see. Don Jr.'s in prison by the end of the week once Mueller gives his testimony. What's Weissman, the second in command, out there saying today? Do you know what he's saying? Mueller was weak. Mueller was a coward. If I was in charge, we would have prosecuted Trump. So the entire media class and Democrats have done a complete 180 on Bob Mueller. He was unassailable. He was the best man for the job. And when we brought up, well, wait a minute, why did he pick these 17 top lawyers and advisors that are all Democrats and all Hillary supporters? What were we told? Well, that doesn't matter because Bob Mueller's a by-the-book guy. He'll rein them in. Now we have an admission from all of these Hillary-supporting Democrats that were on that. Oh, actually, Mueller sucks. You should have let us bring Trump down. Now, the article that you put up.
This is what happened. You're actually talking about the text from the FBI. That was the second story.
Right.
This was the first story, and then tell us real quick about the first story with Christopher Steele's subsource, and then let's dive deep into Flynn and the timeline starting in August of 2016.
Right.
So this is Kim Strassel of the Wall Street Journal.
So this story is even more devastating because it's simpler to understand how corrupt the FBI was. Keep in mind, the way that the FBI was able to spy on the Trump campaign was by getting a FISA warrant on a low-level Trump associate named Carter Page. Now, what a FISA warrant says is you can't use the FBI to spy and wiretap people that are United States citizens because we have Bill of Rights protections and a guarantee of privacy. So what you have to do is go to a court called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. You go to them and you get a warrant saying we're allowed to spy on these people. And the way you get that warrant is you argue to the court. You assume, or you're not assuming, you have proof that the person you're spying on is a foreign spy. So they accused a Trump associate, Carter Page, of being a foreign spy. Bill Binney, who was one of the people tasked with first creating kind of the policies that went into this, he was a former NSA agent. He has publicly said that what they use is called a two-hop rule. So by spying on Carter Page, they were also allowed to spy on every single person that Carter Page talked to on the phone, had email conversations with, etc. But they were also able to spy on every single person that those people talked to. And therefore, they had the entire Trump administration. They spied on them all. Now, this warrant was obtained using the Steele dossier. Steele was a British spy that was paid for by the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's team to get dirt on Trump. And let me just make this as clear as possible. The accusation that the FBI was making about Trump was that he was getting dirt on Hillary from Russians. And so to prove this, Hillary Clinton paid Russians for dirt on Donald Trump. And the FBI used this dirt from Donald Trump, or to spy on Donald Trump. We now know, this was the bombshell that was released this week. The FBI was aware at the time that they accepted Christopher Steele's dossier. They knew that the primary source of that, in other words, Christopher Steele was just a guy compiling information. He didn't claim to have any direct knowledge. But he said, I talked to a Kremlin official that told me that basically Trump and Carter Page and Papadopoulos are all Russian spies. It was more nuanced than that, but that's basically what they said. We now know that that Kremlin official was known by the FBI to be a national security risk as far back as 2009. In other words,
the United States.
Exactly. In other words, the FBI took the unverified word of someone they thought was a Russian official and spy that was seeking to damage the United States. They took his word without fact-checking anything he said as a reason to spy on Donald Trump. That is, I don't know how to make the case clear. Imagine this. Their allegation, the entire Democrat allegation was Russians are spreading disinformation. Russians want to create division in the country. I've been saying for 2 years now that the biggest example of Russian interference into our system was the Kremlin official that gave the information to Christopher Steele that allowed the FBI to spy on Trump. We now know, not only did they know he was a Russian, but they actually had him flagged as a national security risk to the United States. So right. Just to summarize, this is how unbelievable this is. They accused Carter Page of being a spy for Russians. And to prove that, they took the word of someone they knew was a spy from Russia that wanted to hurt the United States.
Right. So on number 8, the 8th tweet here from Kimberly Strassel, wasn't it Mueller's job to find sources of Russian disinformation? How do you miss the guy potentially feeding it directly to the FBI?
That's exactly, you can go back and watch my video on my YouTube channel the day after Mueller's testimony ended. Actually, the day Mueller's testimony ended, I said the exact same thing. I was like, where are the Republicans hammering it down? If you read, remember, Mueller was brought in because allegedly we couldn't trust the FBI because Donald Trump was in charge of the FBI. We couldn't trust the FBI to investigate Russian interference. So Rod Rosenstein, which I'm not even going to get into his shadiness, but Rod Rosenstein appointed Mueller, a special counselor. And he had to write what was called a scope memo. In other words, Rosenstein brings in an outsider and says, here's what I want you to look at. The very first thing Rosenstein wrote in that memo is, I want you to investigate all instances of Russian interference. We now know that Mueller and the FBI knew that the evidence they were using to spy on Donald Trump was obtained for a national security risk and a Kremlin official. So how is that not Russian interference? And yet, as Kimberly Strassel correctly points out, and I was pointing out over 2 years ago, why didn't Mueller investigate that example of Russian interference? And by the way, there's another question. The first person that the Crossfire Hurricane allegedly started over was a man by the name of George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos' big crime was he allegedly talked to a Russian spy who was a professor named Joseph Misfit, who said that Russia had dirty emails on Hillary. Yet, Jim Jordan correctly points out in Mueller's interview, or in Mueller's testimony, he says, Mr. Mueller, isn't it true that the FBI interviewed alleged Russian spy Joseph Misfit, the Russian spy who started it all? And Mueller says, yes, that's true. And Jim Jordan says, isn't it true that that Russian spy lied 3 times to the FBI? The very crime that Papadopoulos was charged with and Roger Stone was charged with? And Mueller says, yes, that's true. And so Jim Jordan says, then why didn't you elect the very Russian spy why didn't you elect to charge the very Russian spy that you think started this all with a crime? In other words, what happens is, every single time there's alleged Russian interference that benefited the Democrats, the FBI and Mueller team said, oh, we're not going to look into that. Nope, we don't have to look into that Russian interference. Even though it was the most significant example
as the scope of the investigation was to try to find anything to get the president. Would you consider this a peaceful transfer of power?
No, it's a coup. It's sedition. Right. At best for them, it's sedition. I'm not sure what the legal statute says, but I would think this should be life in prison for all of those. Or it's treason because they sought to overthrow the government of the United States by using hostile powers in the effort of that overthrow. Remember, we also know, here's another thing that came out in the past 2 weeks. Remember the claim that 17 intelligence agencies said that Russia was interfering to help Trump? You remember that claim? And then that switched to, well, it was 4. Now it's coming out that actually it was 4 people, handpicked by Brennan, who went against other intelligence officials from the CIA and other agencies because those officials had evidence that actually it looked as if the Russians wanted Hillary Clinton to win. So Brennan's handpicked team said, no, they really wanted Trump to win. So now what we want, if that's true, and I will be best to say, I'll try to be fair and say it's a wash, but there certainly could be the possibility that Russia at least wanted to interfere in our system and possibly wanted Hillary to win. We now know that our FBI and our CIA was actively working with pro-Kremlin officials to take down the elected leader of the United States. That's treason.
Yep. So let's go back to August of 2016. The investigation on Flynn was started. But that kind of petered out pretty fast, no?
Yes. Because there was no crime there. Remember, the investigation in Flynn was, this was allegedly his crime. His crime allegedly was he was talking too much to his Russian counterpart. Now, I can say this with the utmost confidence, even though I've never worked in Washington, that anytime you have a transfer of power where you have a new administration coming in, before they are actually sworn in, their team, if they're good, is talking to counterparts around the world, both allies and potential adversaries. Because you don't want, for example, let's say Joe Biden wins. You don't want Joe Biden coming in day one and it's like, okay, well, we haven't talked to any foreign world leader. So the first 3 months is just going to be introducing, how you doing, right? Like, no, you want that relationship. They know they've won the election in November, so they're starting to talk. Or they know they're running and have a chance to win, so they're starting to talk. So there was never a crime. Flynn was just doing exactly what you would expect. And the specific allegation of his crime, which is even funnier, was he was so... Oh my God, can you believe what Michael Flynn allegedly did? Are you ready for this? He asked Russia not to harm us. Oh my goodness, no, the evil monster. He said, I know that Obama has sanctioned you, but please don't retaliate too much. Because we want to have a chance to have our own relationship with you. The monster! How dare he not just say he was going to nuke Russia? So yes, of course, there was no case. But this was the key, again, as I started off saying, the Obama administration isolated Flynn as the key, because Flynn was the one person that was in the Obama administration that was adamantly against the Iran deal, that thought that Obama's foreign policy was a disaster. Obama allegedly sat Trump down and said, look, I have one request of you when you're building your team. Don't take Michael Flynn. And that's because Obama was worried that Flynn would correctly point out to Trump the disastrous foreign policy decisions of the Obama administration, and Trump would then investigate and unravel the legacy of Barack Obama. And so they correctly...
Starting with Iran.
That's right, starting with the Iran deal. So this was, they needed to take Michael Flynn out. They needed to take him out. Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, those were just stepping stones to get to Trump. But Flynn was targeted because he was Michael Flynn. Not just because he was an ally of Trump, but because he was a perceived enemy of Barack Obama who had the credibility, the know-how, and the experience to correctly articulate why the foreign policy decisions of Barack Obama were potentially corrupt and certainly a bad idea.
So, what changed in December? Okay, and literally, it's so funny, right? When you read Strzok and Page's texts, they literally bought insurance policies. I know he talked about it. We have an insurance policy, but it's ironic that he said and characterized it as, we have an insurance policy. Mm-hmm. What changed in December with Strzok to bring Flynn back into the picture? Do you think it was that they figured out that Flynn would be the national security advisor, and by targeting him and removing him, it would protect what they were about to do of giving $4 billion in cash to Iran? Do you think that had anything to do with it?
Yeah, and I think that certainly did, but I think there's more to it. I think that they scrambled. Look, here's why this election is so important and why I'm so pessimistic about this election that I think the Democrats will steal it. It's not the Democrats stealing it, it's the establishment stealing it. Allegedly, Hillary Clinton said on election night when she found out that she lost, we're all going to hang. The crimes of our establishment in both parties and how they've been not just horribly neglectful of average and working class Americans, but the crimes they've committed, little things you could see with Hunter Biden, for example, of our government sending billions of dollars to foreign countries that we say are corrupt, and then those countries then sending millions of dollars back to the family members of the very politicians that sent your tax dollars over there. Military-industrial complex getting all this money for foreign regime change wars. Us arming terrorists and then taking away the American people's rights away in the name of fighting terrorism. All of this crap was going on, and if Jeb Bush would have won, or Hillary Clinton would have won, or Mitt Romney won, or Obama wins, it could all continue unimpeded. They realized once Trump won, they were like, oh crap, we stacked the deck but not enough. Now Trump won, and now we're worried that he'll come after us. And so they immediately decided on election night that they were going to use this tactic of saying he colluded with Russia. And so then from that point, it was just a matter of getting the correct players to fall in line. we know that there were basically spies, or I don't know if spies is the correct word. There were people around Trump that were not favorable to Trump, that were basically feeding information back to the establishment. So I think you're right, Carlos. They probably saw that Michael Flynn's talking to Donald Trump about this Iran deal and about the horrible foreign policy of Trump. We got to do something. We got to get him out of there. Instead, we want someone like John Bolton in there. Because we know we could trust him to just push for these foreign regime change wars and steer Trump away from actually investigating this corruption that's been going on for the past 20 years.
Now, the people of the United States might have not believed that the president was going to come in and, like he said, no one owns me. The Obama administration literally believed him, right? Or else they wouldn't react this way. Because if they didn't believe that Trump was going to change things and change the way that we did business with the rest of the world, they would have never really done anything, because they wouldn't have ever cared about giving the money to Iran, $4 billion and pallets of cash. But they took this threat seriously, that this guy was going to do something.
Right. And
Your thoughts on that?
Just real quick, you don't even have to, again, this sounds like a very complicated story, and I talk a lot about it on my channel, and I can go on for hours about it. But just know this, right? Even if you're on the left, I implore you. The leader of the left in 2016, who would you said it would have been after the election? Either Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi. They were the two top Democrats. Chuck Schumer went on national television and said that Donald Trump should not criticize the intel agencies because they'd find 6 ways on Sunday of getting back at him. That is a startling admission that should scare every single American. Your vote doesn't matter. Whoever you elect doesn't matter, because the people behind the scenes at the CIA and the FBI will destroy them if they go against their wishes. I don't care. If you're on the left and you're like, well, Orange Man bad, so I don't care that they did that to Donald Trump. You think they wouldn't have done that to whoever your candidate would be if they went against their wishes? For example, if you're a progressive, maybe you like someone like Jill Stein or Tulsi Gabbard. You don't think the FBI and the CIA won't do the same things to them? In other words, the American people's vote doesn't matter. The only vote that matters is the FBI vote, the CIA vote. Now, if you vote for someone who aligns with them, like Joe Biden, great, no problem. But if you vote for someone who disagrees with them, and what's their agenda? Is it America first? No. Their agenda is never-ending war, never-ending siphoning of resources from the working class of this country until the elites, never-ending globalism and the destruction of national borders and our national identity. That's the goal of the FBI and the CIA. And the left used to know this. They protested those groups way back in the Iraq War. So it is, if you say, well, Rob and Carlos, this sounds like a convoluted conspiracy. Chuck Schumer admitted it to all of us in 2016. Or maybe it was early 2017. That should have been it. Everyone should have been like, wait, what? Are you serious? So yeah, it is no doubt that they're engaged, that that's what this is, that they're fighting back at what they believed Donald Trump was someone who would not be bullied by them. And so he had to be crushed. By the way, even though you know I have my problems with her, the same's true of Tulsi Gabbard. This is why they go after her. She, to the establishment, to the CIA and FBI, she looks like someone that they can't control. So they'll crush her. And they'll do so to every single person. They did it to Jill Stein. They did it to Ron Paul. They did it to Dennis Kucinich. And these are figures on the left and the right. They will crush anyone who they see as a thorn in their side in their goal for total power in this country.
Right. So, fast forward to January 5th and the meeting in the Oval Office. Tell us exactly what happened based on what you know with the attendees: Yates, Comey, Vice President Biden, Rice, who eventually wrote that email, and the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Right. So
give us an idea of what happened there.
Right. So according to Susan Rice's email, this is the official story, and then I'll give my interpretation. But they sat down to discuss Russian interference and whether or not Barack Obama asked, can I trust to give national intelligence information to the incoming President of the United States, particularly about Russia? Or is Trump compromised by Russia? Now, brief aside, remember, as we know, there's a book that was written from someone who had quotes from people in the room the night of the election when Hillary Clinton realized she lost, and they immediately formulated this strategy. We're going to blame Russia. we're going to say that Trump colluded with Russia. So this was the election night. This was their plan to get Trump from the get-go. And so this is Obama. I don't think it played out as Susan Rice is saying, like it was like, oh, I'm very concerned about this. This was them being like, all right, how are we going to take down Trump? But what the email says is, he said, can I trust the President of the United States? We want to talk about a peaceful transference of power. We literally have an admission that the President of the United States, Barack Obama, is scheming ways to hamper the next incoming president with national security information that he won't release to him. That is devastating. By the way, we also know at the same time that Barack Obama was laxing restrictions on classified information amongst intelligence agents, which thereby led to the leaks that we saw. In other words, and he was talking to world leaders that were our allies, saying that there were questions about whether or not Trump was compromised by Russia. So all of this picture holistically shows Barack Obama was doing everything he could to not only hamper Trump, to spy on Trump, but to tell world leaders and other intel agencies that Trump couldn't be trusted. And we want to talk about a peaceful transference of power? So anyways, in their attempt to get Trump, Barack Obama specifically mentions the name Flynn. Comey says, we don't have any evidence that Flynn did anything wrong, but he is talking to Kislyak a lot. It was Joe Biden himself who said, perhaps this is a Logan Act violation. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Logan Act is something that's never been successfully prosecuted that just says that someone who's not in government isn't allowed to talk with adversarial governments on policy issues. But that really wouldn't apply anyways to an incoming national security advisor, so the charge was garbage. Not to mention, Joe Biden himself is on tape talking to the president of the Ukraine saying, once I'm a private citizen, I'll continue to work with you on policy decisions. So, if anything,
and
Biden...
his son was on the board
That's right.
of the corrupt Burisma company that the president of the United States at that time was trying to help the Ukraine get rid of.
That's right. So anyways,
corruption.
Biden suggests the Logan Act. Obama suggests looking into Flynn. Susan Rice says, well, but Obama said everything should be done by the book. And it was at that meeting that James Comey decides that they're going to send FBI agents to question Flynn. Now, Comey later admitted in public, in an interview, that they would have never gotten away with doing that to any other incoming president. He says that it was completely unprecedented. We know that the FBI agents, under Comey's direction, intentionally misled Flynn and said, oh, you don't need a lawyer, it's just a friendly conversation. So Flynn had no idea that he was being targeted, that this was an inquiry that could put him in legal jeopardy. He thought he was just talking to other agents like, hey, what really happened? We know now that the FBI intentionally withheld evidence from Flynn, which is illegal. As a defense, you are entitled to evidence that the prosecution has that could prove your innocence. We know that the FBI withheld all of this. And so this was the meeting, and we have these texts from the other FBI agents that we haven't had their names released yet, but that were saying that they knew that things were heating up because Obama at that Oval Office meeting, they're the ones that directed this going. At the same time, we know probably Sally Yates was the one who unmasked Flynn. In other words, they were spying on this Russian Kislyak, which they're allowed to do. But someone in Obama's administration illegally leaked to the press the conversation this Russian had with Flynn. That's a crime. We know that the FBI agents think that was someone directly in that Oval Office meeting. So when you look at the picture as a whole, what it shows is Barack Obama and Joe Biden were specifically there working with Susan Rice, Sally Yates, and James Comey to say, we want you to target Flynn, get him by any means necessary. Comey admits that they did so in an unprecedented way. They withheld information that showed that Flynn was innocent, and they intentionally unmasked to the public so they could work with their allies in the media to smear Flynn, which resulted in bankrupting Flynn and getting Flynn the key cornerstone of the foreign policy expertise of Trump that would have unraveled Obama's administration's goals. It succeeded in getting him removed from his position.
Now, I will say this to you. Looking back at it 3.5 years later, the president's biggest mistake was not hiring Flynn.
Right.
The president's biggest mistake was hiring Priebus as a reward for his chairmanship of the Republican Party as chief of staff, and his lack of experience as chief of staff in allowing the FBI to come and talk to Flynn. Because there's no way, like Comey said. They're disorganized. Let's take advantage of that. You have to go through the chief of staff's office to get an interview with the national security advisor, and Priebus should have been fired for that. He was eventually let go for other reasons, but this is what happens when you don't have a seasoned staff, a seasoned political staff for a president that's an outsider, not a politician.
Right, and in addition to that,
and to a certain extent, not all of it, to a certain extent, I understand the problems that the president had in trying to hire people that are competent people that are politically seasoned, and kudos to the Democrats to try to take advantage of that Achilles heel. Is that not correct?
Right. And let me just say real quick, according to these FBI texts, their biggest fear in the FBI was that Trump's incoming attorney general would start an investigation into them. And what was it that the Democrats successfully did? The first thing they did, immediately got Trump's attorney general to recuse himself, thereby putting the investigation into the hands of people like Rod Rosenstein that were involved in the coup against Trump. So it was the Fox
starting... Could you tell
us
why he decided to do that? What were his reasons for it?
Why Sessions recused himself?
Yeah.
Two reasons. One was because he was appointed by Trump and they were investigating Trump, he shouldn't be allowed to partake, which is absolute nonsense. And the other reason was apparently Jeff Sessions did not appropriately disclose that one time he had a dinner and there were some Russian guys there. That's it. They didn't talk in private. They had dinner and sat across from each other at the table and had 3 minutes of banter. But because they didn't disclose it. Now, keep in mind, at the same time, we actually have the FBI and Hillary's team paying someone that they believed was a national security risk, who was a Kremlin agent, and they were taking that dirt and spying on Trump for it. But Jeff Sessions eating dinner with a Russian, that was considered faux pas. He couldn't be involved in the investigation then. And real quick, because I know I've been dominating the time, I'm anxious to hear Todd's thoughts on these revelations that came out.
In the last week, with respect to the subsource and with respect to the FBI texts. It's ironic that the parallel to the Myrtle Beach case is the fact that texts are important, aren't they? An important source of communication to be able to establish not only mindset but intent. Todd.
You want to pass the vodka and the fish eggs?
Beets. A lot of
He
beets.
has to recuse himself because he went to dinner?
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, folks, if the Attorney General of the United States has to recuse himself because he went to dinner with the Russians, how the hell is Brandon Pardo running an investigation on himself when his nephew's in the room?
Hey, remember when the Attorney General under Barack Obama met in secret with Bill Clinton on a tarmac while she was investigating Bill Clinton's wife and still refused to recuse herself? I mean, God forbid she have dinner with someone who knew the Clintons, then she would have had to recuse herself. But actually meeting them in secret on a tarmac, no need to recuse. This is the insanity of the Democrats.
And secret, by the way, is that they put a lid on the media. So there was no media anywhere around, and the FBI literally wasn't allowed to be on the plane.
And Todd, let me ask you, since we're talking of the parallels of... I was just going to say...
They forgot to give the memo to the kid reporter from Phoenix who was walking around the airport and saw the president's plane tarmacked with the secretary's plane.
Imagine this, Todd, if we're looking at the importance of text messages and kind of applying that to the Myrtle Beach case. Imagine if the local police in Williamsport that were allegedly investigating this, imagine that if you subpoenaed their text messages and they were like, oh, sorry, what happened was, Todd, there were 15 phones that we had, and in each of those phones, we accidentally put on airplane mode, and then accidentally put the wrong password in 10 times, which accidentally deleted every piece of evidence that you requested. Sorry. Would you accept that? Would you accept, like, oh, that sounds reasonable? Or would you say you're covering something up?
How many phones exactly this happened to? 30?
25, I think. 15 separate agents, 25 phones. And this was Mueller's team.
Of the Russian investigation team.
Yes, Mueller's team. The FBI also had deleted phones. But Mueller's team then had 25 deleted phones, each one an accident. Todd, what would you say as a journalist if you had a Freedom of Information Act request, or if you were put on your investigator hat, if you were an investigator, and that's what you were told by the local police?
Having been told that by the local police that no records exist, I am actually appealing that answer because I don't believe them.
Right.
Oh, that's right. I actually did a story that showed they were in contact with Myrtle Beach and gave Myrtle Beach the runaround. Why?
Yep. So the June 5th.
By the way, just as a footnote, Carlos, does that allow them to put that on their resume that they're then qualified to work for the FBI in certain situations that they've done that? Is that a resume like the fax thing?
Yeah. Adds resume, adds FBI investigator.
Well, wait. So those police agents are qualified now to work at the FBI. Pardo and the ones that were there and saw nothing. We see nothing. They're now qualified to be prison guards for Ghislaine Maxwell. That way, when she kills herself, they will conveniently have seen nothing. I'm sure the FBI is actively looking for prison guards that have the unique ability to fall asleep exactly as someone kills themselves.
Right. Right. And
if my sources are correct, those folks involved in that Myrtle Beach cover-up will be getting very familiar with prison guards if my sources have any credibility at all. So that's for a future show.
The January 5th meeting. What was specifically decided on that meeting that they were going to send investigators to go and question Comey? Flynn, is that correct?
Yes. So they decided, and we now know from further conversations in public that James Comey has had, that they decided the best way to do this, to not alert suspicion from Flynn, was to not go through the proper channels of the chief of staff, like you said, which would have been previous, but instead approach Flynn directly, tell him he didn't need a lawyer, and approach it in a very unusual way, as if this was just chums sitting down over a cup of coffee having a discussion. Now, we also know that the 302s from the two agents, it was Peter Strzok and... sorry, right now it slips my name. I do know his name, but it's not coming to me. The other agent. One of the things that should blow everyone's mind, every time I talk about this case, I mention this. This is called a cell phone. It has a unique ability on it where there's a record feature, both video and audio, which would blow your mind, right? For some reason, our FBI, when they interview people, they don't record it. They take notes, sometimes weeks later, about what was said. Then if you have an agent like, I don't know, Peter Strzok, that talked about being able to smell Trump supporters at Walmart and thinking Hillary should win 1,000,000 and needing an insurance policy against Trump. Now we just have to take Peter Strzok's handwritten notes as gospel that that's what was said. So we have
that's why they do it.
Right. That's
why they do it.
They do it so they could lie. Right.
Exactly right. The only thing that really happened are the things that are in their notes.
Right. And so what they did was, even after that meeting, even Strzok walked...
Do you understand how cynical that is?
It's incredible.
Do you understand how many years and years and years of experience in being in the room with suspects and understanding that if you record it, you must eliminate any type of evidence that recuses them.
Let me ask you this, Carlos. Right?
Only your notes.
Let me ask you this. Why is it, and this is something I agree with, we have this entire movement of Black Lives Matter alleging that police are hunting black people for sport because they're racist, right? That's part of the allegation. Part of something that's come from this that I think is a compromise we could have is, I do think the police officers should have body cams. I do. But certainly that's a gripe that I could agree with people that criticize the police. I agree with them on. So why is it that the same activists on the left that are so critical and saying police need to videotape what they're doing, why haven't we heard word one of them saying, wait a minute, why is the FBI not videotaping interviews? Can you imagine if instead of actually seeing footage of George Floyd, we just had Derek Chauvin's handwritten notes of the encounter? Can you imagine the difference in that story? But that's exactly what we accept from the FBI. Even when the FBI agents are publicly not publicly, but saying in text messages, we need an insurance policy, we have to do what we can to stop this man from being elected. Yet, I haven't heard one law enforcement reform activist say, why in hell is the most funded investigative agency in the history of the world, the FBI, still not have funds to have cell phones to record the conversations that they're having?
How inconvenient is this?
Yeah.
See, we can't have this. We can't have this. We can't have body cam evidence of Breonna Taylor's scene as the events unfolded in the apartment. Can't do it, because then it affects the narrative that we want to tell. And the narrative that we want to tell is anything but the truth.
Yep.
So they have the meeting, they come back, and what is the one key piece of evidence that the entire FBI hangs their hat on to be able to get Flynn from that meeting?
They claim that the FBI agents initially claimed they didn't feel that he lied, but the claim that Mueller's team made was that he lied about having a conversation with Kislyak about sanctions. According to
that's obviously that's a lie.
That is a lie. That the Mueller's team's accusation is itself a lie. We now have proof. We have the transcripts from those phone calls that show he never once mentioned sanctions. He mentioned
they never thought that those conversations would ever be public, so they just proceeded forward.
That's right. So what they did was, what he did say, Flynn said basically this, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, so you can find these documents yourself online. But what Flynn said was basically, hey, Kislyak, I know that Putin's pretty upset, probably, that diplomats were expelled. Because that's one of the things Obama did. He did two things. He put sanctions on Russia, and he kicked out diplomats. He said, we don't want you Russian oligarchs here, so he kicked them out of the country. And so what Flynn said, he never mentions the sanctions, but he's talking to his counterpart. Think about it. Like, you have a boss at your job, and you're talking to someone from another company. You're like, hey, man, I know how it is. I got a boss, too. But that's what Flynn's doing. And he says, look, I know Putin's probably furious, but can you do us a favor? Don't overreact. I know that there will be a reaction. And Flynn says that. He says, I know that there has to be a reaction from Russia, but please don't overreact until we get in office and a chance to talk to you and maybe smooth things over. That's it. He never mentioned sanctions, so what he was charged with was a lie. In fact, if you go back, and I, again, hate to brag, but over a year ago, they released the 302 from Peter Strzok. A 302 is those handwritten notes of the conversation. I did an entire video going through this 302. In that 302, this is the FBI's notes. This is what they allege. They ask Flynn, they say, did you talk to Kislyak about sanctions? And Flynn says, I don't remember that. And so then they're like, well, blah, 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 blah. Are you sure you didn't talk to Kislyak about sanctions? And Flynn says, I don't recall. And then they ask one more time, a third time, they say, are you sure you didn't talk to Kislyak about sanctions? And Flynn actually says in their notes, I guess I could have, I just don't remember. Now, if Mueller's saying that constitutes a lie, every single time that Mueller or Comey or McCabe or Hillary Clinton or Brennan or Clapper testified in Congress or Comey and said, I don't remember, that's a lie. They should be locked up by that same extrapolation.
Right. So, because we don't have the video and we don't have the audio and we only have the text, the generous interpretation of what Flynn was saying is he was just merely being honest.
Right.
I really don't remember.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Right.
And they're taking that to be some sort of smoking gun that he did talk about it and he was lying to the FBI agents, even though the FBI agents came back and said they didn't believe he was lying.
And keep in mind, here's the other thing to know. The FBI had the entire transcript of Flynn's calls with Kislyak before they met with him. So
that's devastating.
That's right.
So they knew he wasn't lying.
That's right. They knew that he didn't break any law.
But they were just looking to see if they can get him to lie.
That's exactly what it was. Because
and exactly what Senator Harris was trying to do with Kavanaugh in the confirmation hearings last year.
So what this is, it is what the entire, and I'm sure we're wrapping up here, so let me just real quick. What this is the Obama administration said, take this person down, find a crime. That is not how that is antithetical to everything about the United States. We're not supposed.
But it's worse than that, isn't it? Isn't it worse than
that?
Oh
yeah, it's definitely worse. It would be the equivalent.
They not only got Flynn, to get fired. But you can draw a straight line from this Flynn investigation to Mueller, no? And his investigation?
Well, right. Look, and don't take my word for it.
It wasn't enough. They needed to go get Trump.
Right, and don't take my word for it. Look at the judge in the Manafort trial. He admitted this. The judge in the Manafort trial publicly said, this isn't about Paul Manafort. You guys are trying to get Trump. That's what's going on here. And imagine this. Imagine Todd, for example. So Todd sees some sort of corruption going on in this Myrtle Beach case. So he starts to report on it. Imagine if the local police, I'm just saying hypothetically this could happen, or tax collectors or someone. Imagine that they looked at Todd and said, we don't like what Todd's doing, so why don't you turn his life upside down and find any crime to pin on him? That is not the way our system's supposed.
In the meantime, tomorrow night we're going to firebomb his car
That's right.
in his driveway.
Just like they did. That's what they did to the Trump team. They said, and I've been predicting this for 3 years, I said, what they'll do. I'm actually shocked. To this day, I'm shocked they didn't find more on Trump. Because if you're a billionaire, and if you're someone who's in position to even run for the presidency of the United States, I assume there's some sort of crime in your history. Some sort of, you didn't pay enough taxes, or you put this money in this offshore account. Something. Some sort of, crime. Even if it's not intentional, there's something you could dig your teeth into. Right. So my claim all along's been like, what they were going to do is they said, okay, it's going to come public that the way we started this investigation was incredibly corrupt, but as long as we get charges for something, we'll be able to defend it. We'll say, well, yes, okay, maybe we started, but we knew that Trump was guilty, and look, we got him on this crime. That's what they're doing with
the end would justify the
right.
means.
That's what they're doing with Flynn, Papadopoulos, Roger Stone. Oh, look at all the people that were arrested. See, that proves this wasn't a coup. And I say that's fair. If that's what you want to do, fine. But we should give the same treatment to every single politician in Washington. Let's raid their lawyers' offices in the middle of the night, right? Let's do it. How many do you think would come back innocent? 5%? Let's do it. Why is it only that Donald Trump and people connected to him?
And the one that's most in jeopardy with respect to a long list of crimes is Hillary Clinton.
Oh, of course.
Have you ever noticed that Todd Bartley could pass as Orange Man Bad 2?
You think he's orange?
Yeah, look at him.
The curtains maybe put a hue off.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Robert.
All right, so there's so much going on, and I guess because we're talking about the Russia stuff, I'll talk about it briefly in my final thoughts. This is very confusing, but just remember, in fact, I'll make this broader than Russia. COVID's confusing, Russia's confusing, there's all of these names, just like the Myrtle Beach case is confusing. What I like to do is try to tell you the truth and give you the proper information, because many people don't have time to sit down and research all of these stories like I do. I'm lucky, Todd and Carlos are lucky that we're good at this, we enjoy it, and we have the time to do this. Not everyone has that. So what I want to do is try to break these stories down in a truthful way that's as simple as possible. So with COVID, if you're saying, I wonder, well, I hear things on both sides. How do I know which side's telling the truth? Our governor intentionally put COVID patients in nursing homes that he knew were the most vulnerable population, which resulted in thousands of deaths. Our governor told us that we were cowards that weren't allowed to go to work and weren't allowed to go visit our family if there was a funeral in our family or visit our grandparents, while he violated his own orders and went out and marched with Black Lives Matter. In this Russia situation, I want you to think of it this way. The easiest way to look at politics is the shoe on the other foot test. So just briefly, I want you to imagine this scenario. Let's say that right now, Trump is looking at who he thinks Biden's national security advisor would be. Maybe it's John Bolton, but just say anyone. It could be anyone, right? And so let's say Trump and his team have a meeting tonight, and they say, we don't like John Bolton. Joe Biden's going to pick him. So why don't we go to him and spy on all of his phone calls? We'll release those phone calls to the press if there's anything shady that was said. We'll interview him without the presence of his lawyer. We won't film it. We'll accuse him of lying. We'll leak that to the press. We'll ruin his life, bankrupt him. We'll go after everyone connected to Joe Biden that we can. We'll pay, Chinese agents that we know are Chinese spies. We'll pay them to give us dirt on Joe Biden. We'll then use that dirt as an excuse to spy on Joe Biden and investigate him for the next 4 years. We'll raid their offices in the middle of the night. We'll tip off CNN when we arrest his associates and drag them out in their underwear. Imagine that if Trump did 1/1000th of that. Don Jr. was accused of treason for meeting with a Russian lawyer in Trump Tower because maybe he had some connections to Russia. Hunter Biden received $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife, and no one's breathing a word. Imagine if we had FBI agents under Trump while he's using the FBI to investigate Biden and leak information to the press to go after him. Imagine if we found out that FBI agents were saying, man, I think that this is just Trump being political. I don't think that there's any crime there. Imagine if that happened. What would the left be saying? He would be impeached 50 times. But when the left does it, did you know that after these Russian bombshell stories that I talked to you today, I went to MSNBC and I went to CNN, there wasn't one story, not one story on their page about the fact that the very person at the center of the spying on Donald Trump, that the FBI said, this person's credible, this is who we need to listen to without verifying the information, was a person that the FBI themselves thought was a Russian spy that was trying to damage the United States. And this wasn't covered by the left-wing media. Lastly, I think it's important to realize that these people that are covering this stuff, it is important that you understand that every single issue that we're talking about, COVID, Black Lives Matter, Amy Coney Barrett, all of this stuff is still being fed to you, and the narrative's being controlled by the very same people that lied to you and that embraced or covered up a coup of the President of the United States. Until these people are brought to justice, this country and your vote, I don't care if your vote's progressive Bernie Sanders all the way to Donald Trump or anyone in between. Your vote is irrelevant. This country is controlled by deep state actors in places like the CIA and the FBI, and until they're brought to justice, and not just a slap on the wrist, but face serious criminal time, nothing will change. And so please reach out to your Congress people, do whatever you can to bring attention to this coup that was brought against Trump and how they're doing it in other ways now, whether it be going after Amy Coney Barrett, embracing Black Lives Matter and their riots, the lockdowns on COVID, etc.
So if Jennifer Lake, Williamsport Area School District Board member, wrote an article, which she did, talking about how Black Lives Matter because she adopted a black son, doesn't she then have to support current Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett, who adopted 2 Haitian children of color? That makes sense, right? Even though Jennifer Lake and Amy Coney Barrett are on different sides of the political aisle, but they do share that in common, that Black Lives Matter. I'll be exploring that in an article here in the very near future, and we'll see just how committed Jennifer Lake is to her wokeness. And just a teaser, next weekend's show, as it relates to the Myrtle Beach story, could be one for the ages.
I'm hoping.
With that, I yield my time to Carlos.
So I like to continue to put my boot on the district's neck regarding Myrtle Beach. And that's why I write about it every day on the Myrtle Beach page. I get calls from people that know that I know, that also know them, and they're telling me that they're furious with my commentary. I'm happy it's coming through clearly. The mob is just the loudest. They're not the most. I want you to remember that. So hold your fire and stick to your principles, because fear is just an invitation to prepare. Life will go on. I promise you, life will go on, because we're human, and genuine interaction will never cease to exist. So continue to be genuine. Develop. Get stronger. Study more. Listen more. The truth is right in front of you. This is why Robert says that they work so much overtime to try to distract you from it, because the truth is right in front of you. Have a purpose.
Watson steps up.
Be prepared. Find a way to lead. Find a great leader and help them by serving them. Develop your knowledge so that you can develop your confidence. Do not lie, cheat, or steal. Do not violate the absolutes. Remember that the obstacle is the way. Feel the fear, but go forward anyway, because that's where your potential is. As a patriot, as an American citizen, as a meaningful member of the community, share your knowledge. Create something of value. Learn how to pray. Feed your faith. Allow things that are not important to just shrink away. And remember, leaders are leaders because they make a difference. They change outcomes. They tell a story. I hope this helps you. We'll see you next week.